You know exactly why you do the things you do. You can name the pattern, trace it back to childhood, explain the wound, the trigger, the loop. And still, you do it anyway. Nobody tells you this part, that understanding yourself does not always set you free. Sometimes it just hands you a very detailed map of your own cage. You've read the books, you've done the journaling. You can diagnose your own anxiety mid-sentence, mid-spiral. You know it's an attachment wound. You know it's a fear response. You know. And somewhere along the way, knowing became its own kind of trap. Psychologists call this hyper-reflection, a state where self-focus stops being insight and starts becoming surveillance. You're no longer living the moment, you're narrating it, watching yourself, watch yourself. Researchers Trapnell and Campbell drew an important distinction between two mental habits people often confuse. One is reflection, curious, open, moving toward understanding. The other is rumination, anxious, repetitive, circling the same wound without ever arriving somewhere new. Self-awareness was supposed to be the cure. For some people, it quietly became the disease. Here's what you need to hear first. You are not broken for noticing too much. You are not too self-aware in the way people sometimes use it as an insult. Your mind is doing something intelligent. It's simply aiming that intelligence at the wrong target. The same ability that lets you understand people deeply, notice subtle emotional shifts, and sense what others are feeling, when turned inward without an off switch, becomes exhausting. The problem isn't the tool. The problem is that the tool was never given a resting position. Picture your mind as a lighthouse. A lighthouse is built to scan the horizon. It searches for ships, storms, and coastlines. Self-awareness turns that beam inward. Now it scans every thought, every reaction, every flaw. For a while, this is useful. The beam discovers real things, wounds worth healing. But a lighthouse beam was never designed to stay fixed on one place. Psychologists describe this through self-focused attention theory. When awareness remains locked onto yourself, your brain begins activating many of the same threat detection systems it uses for external danger. Your amygdala doesn't always distinguish between a wolf in the dark and a flaw in your character. It simply receives one message: something is being watched. Stay alert. So the beam refuses to move. What once felt like insight slowly becomes a floodlight pointed directly at your own face, too bright to see anything else. So what can you do? First, name the mode, not just the feeling. Ask yourself, is this reflection or is this rumination? Reflection moves forward. Rumination repeats itself. If you've had the same thought 5 times today, it probably isn't insight anymore. It's a loop. Second, give the beam a curfew. Create a small space, perhaps 10 minutes each day, where you're allowed to examine yourself honestly. When that time is over, let yourself return to the present. That isn't avoidance, that's regulation. Third, widen the lens intentionally. Notice something outside of yourself: a sound, a color, the feeling of your feet against the floor, a breeze against your skin. This isn't distraction, it's reminding your brain that the world is larger than your thoughts. Fourth, allow some understanding to remain unfinished. Not every pattern needs to be solved today. Your nervous system doesn't require perfect answers to begin feeling safe. Sometimes, enough is enough. Finally, separate insight from identity. Saying, I have this pattern, is very different from saying, I am this pattern. The first is information. The second is a prison. So, here's the image to carry with you. A lighthouse doesn't stare at itself. It sweeps. It looks inward, then outward, and keeps moving. That's what makes the light useful. Self-awareness was never meant to become a mirror you stand before forever. It was meant to be a beam, something that visits your inner world, learns what it needs, and then guides you back to the people, the moments, and the life still unfolding around you. You don't need to understand yourself completely before you're allowed to rest. You don't need to solve every pattern before you're allowed to live your life again. Let the beam move. Let some questions remain unanswered tonight. You've already done the hardest part. You looked. Now, let yourself look away too.